Why, yes, that time in April where booing the NFL commissioner is not only okay, it's celebrated. Yes, the NFL draft is underway here in late April, and the Iowa Hawkeyes already hearing one of their studs taken in the first round. We'll talk about the selection of Iowa defensive lineman Lukas Van Ness in a second. But first, I want to thank Iowa Floor Covering. They sponsor so many segments here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. They're partnering with us for this segment. Check out their Tough Core Click Together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring. It's available at a great low rate with self-installation, $269 per foot with self-installation. Visit iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. And even if you're not undergoing a project right now, check out their website, check out what they have to offer, because when that time does come, and it will come if you're a homeowner, right? It's inevitable. You'll have a company to fall back on in Iowa Floor Covering. They will take care of you, give you great advice, great products at a great rate. So we appreciate Iowa Floor Covering partnering with us. And speaking of partnering, Iowa defensive lineman Lukas Van Ness will be partnering with the Green Bay Packers to start his NFL journey. And what an interesting first-round selection this is. I mean, Lukas just continuing to shoot up the NFL draft boards. I was, I'll admit, back in December and into January before he made it official. He made it official in early January, but I'll admit I doubted whether or not he should leave early, whether or not he was first-round material. When he left, it did kind of take me by surprise. I had heard some scuttlebutt that he was planning on returning in early December. Whether or not that was just non-factual information or whether his plans just changed, we don't know. But the bottom line is Lukas Van Ness, now that he's been taken in the top 13 of the NFL draft, I think it's fair to say he made a very wise choice. It was interesting. After the Packers selected him at number 13 overall, Mel Kiper Jr. made a point of saying on the ABC ESPN broadcast that he thought Lukas would have been well served to stay in college for another year. Let's remember that Lukas Van Ness never actually started a game at Iowa. And I know we can have debates about how important that actually is. That stat gets thrown out there a lot. It is kind of a wild stat when you think about it, that a guy who gets drafted number 13 overall could possibly come into the NFL having not really started at his alma mater. But that is the reality of the situation. We know how Iowa plays up front with its defensive line. They rotate a lot of guys in. I don't want to say there's a bias towards older players, but you know Phil Parker, Kirk Ferentz, and company really value experience and leadership. So even though Lukas never really started, he got a lot of snaps. But it still is, it's one of those weird stats. Like, I don't know how to look at it. Like, and when I say stats, I should say facts. The fact that he never started a game, it's kind of like in 2018 when Noah Fant was taken in the first round, despite the fact that he hardly saw the field in a couple of those games late in 2018. Of course, TJ Hawkinson, Iowa's other tight end that year, both those guys were phenomenal, but he got a lot of snaps. But it was just weird how you have a guy who was not even Iowa's main weapon for him to be drafted as high as he was. I'd say the same thing about Lukas Van Ness. Is that something to be proud of if you're Iowa, or is it one of those things where you look back and you think, maybe he should have been a starter, maybe he should have played more? Again, snap count wise, he was right up there with Noah Shannon, Logan Lee, etc. But the bottom line is the NFL draft, a lot of what the draft is potential, right? It's about potential and upside, and this kid's got a lot of it. Of course, he goes by the nickname of Hercules, which was coined by some of his teammates at Iowa. He'll have an opportunity at Green Bay to play early. Obviously, I mean, typically guys who are in the top 15 to 20 picks in the draft are guys who are going to be early impact players. So even though you consider him somewhat of a project, obviously Green Bay feels like he's NFL ready right now. Congratulations to Lukas Van Ness. We've talked about the implications of him leaving for Iowa. They've got a lot of depth behind him, which is good. But man, I think just this storyline is one of the stranger first-round draft picks that have come out of the Kirk Ferentz era. And to think that he is one of the highest picks, one of the highest selections ever in the history of Iowa football, that is a wild, wild stat. It just feels like he was hardly here, was hardly at Iowa. But obviously a lot of potential, good size, strength, agility, tested out pretty darn well at the combine. Congratulations to Lukas Van Ness. We'll see where other Iowa players go, including Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, Riley Moss, Kayvon Merriweather. Could be an historic year for the Iowa Hawkeyes in the NFL draft, especially these first few rounds. You could get 3, even 4 players drafted in the first few rounds this year. So we'll continue to follow it and give you coverage right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Stay tuned all weekend long as we continue to talk the NFL draft.